I thought my medical school's cadavers were from people who donated their bodies to science. I was terribly mistaken. Today was the day, my first day of classes at a prestigious medical college as a first-year medical student. The morning welcomed me with the sunny sky and light breeze of late August, the leaves colored in a greenish-yellowish hue as summer slowly transitioned to fall. I was nervous yet excited, knowing that the road to becoming a physician was not going to be easy, but I was eager to begin taking the next steps towards achieving my dream of becoming a forensic pathologist, as medicine and criminal justice were both my true passions. I was on my way to my first class of the day, gross anatomy, when I accidentally bumped into someone, dropping my textbooks on the ground and quickly scrambling to pick them back up. "I'm so sorry," I apologized. "I didn't mean to." "It's fine," the person said as they helped me pick up the books. I looked up at who I had bumped into and instantly recognized their face. It was Jared, a first-year medical student who was also my classmate during my pre-med years as an undergraduate student. He was a rather tall man, with brown curly hair, freckles, and a chipped tooth, specifically the upper right central incisor. I was stunned to find out that he was attending the same college, but it came to me as no surprise that he got accepted into medical school, as he was always an overachiever in academics. "Jared," I said, still surprised. "I had no idea you were going to school here too." "That's right, Andrea. Isn't that just great? Now let's finish picking up these books and get to class before we're late," Jared said. I looked at my watch to check the time. It was 7:57 a.m., and class was supposed to start at 8 a.m. "Shoot, I'm going to be late." We both scurried to the science building as quickly as we could and ran up the stairs towards room 212 where lecture would be held. We entered a spacious lecture hall where many other medical students sat at their seats. If I had to guess, I'd estimate there was about 30 students in total. Some of them were focusing intently on reading their textbook, while others were just relaxing or chatting before class began. Jared and I decided to sit next to each other at the back of the room since all the other seats had already been taken, which was to be expected as we just barely made it to class on time. As soon as the clock struck 8 a.m., the college professor stood up from his chair and announced that class was now going to begin. He was a lanky old man, maybe in his 60s, with messy grey hair and oversized glasses that kept sliding down his nose. His white coat hung loosely from his thin and frail frame, like a baggy shirt hanging from a clothing hanger. "Welcome to gross anatomy, first years," the professor croaked in a raspy voice. "My name is Dr. Hilton, and I will be your biology instructor this semester. Please open your textbook and turn to page 253. After about 2 hours, lecture came to an end and we were given a 10-minute break before cadaver lab, which is when we'd be able to study and dissect real human cadavers. My first time ever seeing a human cadaver was during my junior year of undergrad. Seeing a dead, skinless human laying right in front of you for the first time is an experience you'll never forget. Finally, it was time to enter the cadaver lab. As soon as I entered the lab, I got a whiff of the putrid, distinct smell of human corpses and formaldehyde, a preservative used to prevent flesh from decaying. There was a total of 4 stainless steel tanks in which a cadaver was kept in a temperature-controlled environment. 2 of the cadavers were male, and the other 2 were female. However, there were more cadavers stored in a freezer in the back of the room that only Dr. Hilton had access to. Dr. Hilton explained that he would occasionally swap the cadavers from the freezer and the tanks throughout the semester so that we could see how each person's anatomy is unique. I carefully observed each cadaver, trying my best to identify and name each anatomical structure. From the splenic artery to the brachiocephalic trunk, there were so many vessels, organs, and muscles I had to memorize for the upcoming lab practical. It was almost overwhelming. Then I noticed something unusual. Upon closer inspection, I realized that the cadaver had a gaping wound at the temporal region that spanned several inches deep. It appeared as if someone had stabbed a large knife into their skull. Curious, I called Dr. Hilton to come over and asked him about it. Dr. Hilton said with a puzzled expression. I'm not sure how that happened. Perhaps someone tampered with the cadaver. Eventually lab ended, and I went back to my dorm to study for the rest of the day. But no matter how hard I tried to focus on my schoolwork, I just couldn't stop thinking about what I saw in the cadaver lab. As an aspiring forensic pathologist, I was naturally observant and possessed a good sense of judgment, and something inside me told me that the wound in that cadaver was not the result of someone tampering with it. There's no way someone would just bring a sharp object and jab the cadaver's head for no reason. Or maybe. No, quit thinking of such silly things. Dr. Hilton would never do something like that. I shook off the thought and concluded that perhaps Dr. Hilton was right and that I'm just tired. I went to bed early to make sure I didn't risk running late for class again and fell asleep within a couple of minutes. The next day, I made it to class on time, but Jared was nowhere to be seen. I shrugged it off and assumed he was just running late again. I looked over to Dr. Hilton, who looked like a zombie as he appeared to struggle to stay awake. His eyes had bags under them, and his hair was even messier than before. It appeared as if he had stayed up all night and just barely escaped a war zone. We were 15 minutes into lecture and Jared was still nowhere to be seen. I tapped the shoulder of my classmate in front of me to get their attention. "Hey," I whispered. "Where the heck is Jared? He should be here by now." The student looked back at me and replied, "You didn't hear about it. Jared dropped out already." I couldn't believe what I had just heard. Jared, of all people, was the person I least expected to drop out of medical school. He was the smartest and most ambitious person I knew. He had received a perfect score on the medical college admission test prior to his enrollment and was granted scholarships from multiple institutions. There is no way Jared would call it quits after the very first day of the semester. I snuck out my phone and sent Jared a text message asking him if he had dropped out, hoping it was just a rumor. By the time lecture and lab were over, I still hadn't received a reply from Jared. Something was off. Jared always gives a rapid response. I sighed and put my phone in my pocket, wishing I knew the answer to Jared's whereabouts. Because the lab practical was just 2 days away, I decided to stay in the lab after class to spend more time studying the cadavers. I became so occupied with my post-class study session that I totally lost track of time. Before I knew it, it was already 3 a.m. I looked at my phone again to see if I got a response back from Jared. Still nothing. I was just about to close the tank when I suddenly froze as I realized something about the cadaver. My eyes widened as fear struck me to my very core. The cadaver had a chipped tooth. More specifically, there was a chip in the cadaver's upper right central incisor, and it looked exactly like Jared's tooth. "No," I whispered shakily. "It can't be. It must be a coincidence." Suddenly the lights in the room turned off, swallowing the room with nothing but the darkness of the night, except the dim light coming from the moon from outside the window. I heard the door behind me squeal open and quickly turned around to see a silhouette of a slender human, but the shadows made it too difficult to make out any facial features. The mysterious figure let out a twisted, vile chuckle that slowly grew into maniacal laughter. Shivers were sent down my spine as the intruder continued to lose control of their hideous laughter. Then the person stepped forward from the shadows and into the moonlight, revealing themselves with an evil grin on their face. "Dr. Hilton," I whimpered. "Why are you here? And what's so funny?" Dr. Hilton licked his lips in excitement before replying in an unsettling tone, "Ms. Andrea, my dear, you'd make the perfect addition to my collection." I didn't want to believe it, but I was right. Dr. Hilton must have murdered Jared and prepared his corpse to be used as a cadaver. I took a step back from the lunatic that stood in front of me. "You," I stammered, suddenly finding myself at a loss for words. "That's right," Dr. Hilton said proudly. "I killed your friend Jared and skinned every inch of him until he was nothing but meat and bones. I have to say, your friend was quite the fighter. But a little girl like you shouldn't be a problem at all." Dr. Hilton pulled out a sharp object that appeared to be a 20-inch, blood-stained machete from the pocket of his white coat and lunged at me with full force. I screamed in terror as I fell to the floor and tried with all my might to push Dr. Hilton's arm away from me as he attempted to plunge the machete into my eye, breathing heavily as he found pleasure in the thought of slaughtering someone to death. Despite his seemingly weak and fragile body, Dr. Hilton was much stronger than he looked. I glanced to my side and saw a scalpel laying on the floor. Desperately, I reached for the scalpel, but it seemed to be just out of my reach. It was close enough that my fingers were able to barely touch it, but far enough that I couldn't quite grasp it. I was losing energy and found myself losing the battle as the machete inched closer and closer to my eye, while Dr. Hilton breathed heavier and heavier as he got closer to finishing me off. Losing hope, I was just about to give up and accept my fate until I started to remember the blood, sweat, and tears I endured to become a medical student. The sleepless nights. The hours of studying that consumed my life. The sacrifices I made to reach this point in my life. Anger surged through my body as I felt a rush of adrenaline flowing inside of me. I reached even farther for the scalpel, so far that it felt like my shoulder could rip out of its socket. Using my fingers, I managed to pull the scalpel towards me and grab it with my hand. Shink. There was a moment of pause before I realized what had just happened. The scalpel was lodged deep into Dr. Hilton's jugular, blood spurting from the wound as he gurgled and choked on his own blood. He collapsed onto the floor, holding onto his neck as he gasped for air. After several seconds of watching him writhe in agony and make horrific noises, he finally went still. I sat there in utter silence for what felt like hours, trying to process what just happened. Once I snapped out of it, I began to sob and rock back and forth on the floor like a lost baby, hoping that all of this was just a nightmare and that I'd wake up soon. Then I remembered it. The freezer, which stored the rest of the cadavers. I fumbled through Dr. Hilton's pockets until I found the key to the freezer. At first, I hesitated as I approached the door that led to the freezer, but I took a deep and shaky breath and proceeded to slowly unlock the door. I prepared myself to see the worst, a room full of familiar dead bodies that fell victim to Dr. Hilton's barbaric ways. But what I saw was somehow even worse than that, which left me scarred for life. There was a mangled body sitting upright in the corner of the freezer that looked just like all the other cadavers, skinned and all. However, this one was still alive and groaning. "Help me!"